I'm Rachel Morrison, 31, and I thought I'd hit rock bottom when my sister Emma walked down the aisle wearing my wedding dress to marry my ex-fiancé. Standing in the back of that chapel, watching 200 guests celebrate the love story that was supposed to be mine, I felt invisible, forgotten, erased from my own life. But as the pastor asked if anyone objected to this union, I stayed silent. Because 3 months of sleepless nights had taught me something crucial. Sometimes the best revenge isn't speaking up. Sometimes it's staying quiet and letting the truth reveal itself. The chapel doors burst open just as they were pronounced. Husband and wife. Federal agents in dark suits flooded the aisle, badges gleaming. Emma Morrison and David Chen, you're under arrest for wire fraud and money laundering. 2 sets of handcuffs, 2 shocked faces. And me finally understanding that my heartbreak had been the best thing that ever happened to me. 3 months earlier, I was living what I thought was my perfect life. My corner office on the 10th floor of Morrison and Associates overlooked downtown Seattle, where I built my reputation as one of the city's most successful marketing directors. At 31, I had everything I'd worked for: a thriving career, a beautiful apartment in Capitol Hill, and David Chen, the man I was going to marry. David's grandmother's sapphire engagement ring caught the morning light streaming through my office window as I reviewed campaign proposals. The vintage setting, passed down through 3 generations of Chen women, felt like a promise of belonging to something bigger than myself. When David slipped it on my finger 6 months earlier, he'd whispered about creating our own family legacy. "You're going to be late for the venue walkthrough," my assistant Maya reminded me, poking her head through my door. She'd been helping me coordinate wedding details between meetings, her excitement almost matching my own. The irony wasn't lost on me that my marketing skills, usually reserved for selling other people's dreams, had been put to work crafting my own fairy tale. David and I had chosen the historic Fairmont Olympic Hotel for our reception, with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Everything was scheduled for perfection: the flowers, the photographer, even the string quartet that would play during dinner. But perfection, I was learning, can shatter in an instant. The change in David started subtly. Phone calls that went straight to voicemail. Date nights postponed for urgent work commitments. When he did show up, he seemed distracted, his attention somewhere else entirely. His kisses felt mechanical, his smiles forced. "Are you okay?" I asked him one evening over dinner at our favorite restaurant in Pike Place Market. We'd been coming here since our second date, sharing plates of fresh seafood and planning our future. That night, he barely touched his salmon. "Just work stress," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "The merger is more complicated than expected." David worked for a tech startup that was being acquired by a larger company. I understood workplace pressure. I navigated plenty of corporate challenges myself. But this felt different. This felt like he was pulling away from me. From us. The ring on my finger suddenly felt heavy as I watched him stare out the window at Elliott Bay. The tourists and vendors bustling around the market seemed to exist in a different world, one where people still believed in happy endings. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding," I suggested gently. "Give you time to sort things out at work." His head snapped toward me, eyes sharp with something I couldn't identify. "No, the wedding is in 6 weeks. Everything's already paid for." The way he said it made my stomach clench, as if the wedding was a business transaction rather than a celebration of our love. But I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself I was being oversensitive. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. I came home early from a client meeting, planning to surprise David with his favorite Thai takeout. I found him sitting at my kitchen table, the engagement ring placed carefully in front of him like evidence at a crime scene. "We need to talk," he said without looking up. My heart hammered against my ribs as I set down the food, suddenly nauseous. "About what?" "This isn't working, Rachel. We've grown apart." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Grown apart?" "David, we've been together for 3 years. We're getting married in 4 weeks. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner." He finally looked at me, and I saw nothing in his eyes. No sadness, no regret, just resignation. "I can't marry you." The kitchen spun around me. Is there someone else? No. The answer came too quickly, too practiced. I just realized we want different things. What different things? 2 months ago, you were talking about honeymoon destinations and baby names. He stood up, straightening his jacket like he was preparing to leave. People change, Rachel. I'm not the same person I was when we got engaged. So we figure it out. We go to counseling. We talk about what's wrong and fix it. There's nothing to fix. I just don't love you anymore. The brutal honesty of it stole my breath. I stared at him, this man I'd shared my bed with, my dreams with, my future with, and saw a stranger. When did he become someone capable of such casual cruelty? The ring, I whispered, gesturing to the table. Keep it. It was my grandmother's, but she would have wanted you to have it. The condescension in his voice made my hands shake. I don't want your pity jewelry, David. Take it back to whatever Chen family vault it came from. He picked up the ring, slipping it into his pocket. I'll handle the wedding cancellations. You shouldn't have to deal with that. How thoughtful of you, I said, surprised by the venom in my own voice. Anything else you'd like to destroy before you leave? He paused at the door, and for a moment, I thought he might show some emotion, some sign that this was difficult for him too. Instead, he said, I'll pick up my things this weekend when you're not here. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone with the Thai food growing cold on the counter, and the stunning realization that my perfect life had been built on quicksand. I slid down the kitchen wall to the floor, finally allowing myself to cry. Not just for the wedding that wouldn't happen or the future that had evaporated, but for the fool I'd been to believe in fairy tales at 31 years old. The worst part was that I had no idea this was only the beginning. Emma arrived at my apartment 20 minutes after I called her, armed with a bottle of wine and a box of tissues. My younger sister had always been the emotional one in our family, quick to cry at movies and even quicker to offer comfort when life got messy. That night, she wrapped me in a hug that smelled like her signature vanilla perfume and let me sob into her shoulder. He's an idiot, she whispered, stroking my hair. A complete and total idiot. I pulled back, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Maybe he's right. Maybe we did grow apart and I just didn't see it. Don't you dare blame yourself for this. Emma's voice carried a fierce protectiveness I'd heard before. Usually when she was defending me to our parents or standing up for me in childhood squabbles. You gave him everything, Rachel. Your heart, your time, your future. If he couldn't appreciate that, then he never deserved you. We settled on my couch with the wine, and Emma listened as I replayed every moment of the past few weeks, searching for clues I'd missed. She asked the right questions, made the right sympathetic noises, and held me when I cried again. Where will you go for the honeymoon? She asked softly. There is no honeymoon, Em. There's no wedding, no marriage, no future. It's all gone. I know, but you had those 2 weeks booked off work. Maybe you should still take them. Go somewhere beautiful by yourself. You deserve that. The thoughtfulness of her suggestion made me tear up again. Emma had always been the caring sister, the one who remembered birthdays and sent care packages during college finals. She was also the one who'd struggled the most in our family, bouncing between jobs and relationships while I climbed the corporate ladder. I don't know if I can afford a vacation right now, I admitted. The wedding deposits alone are going to put me in debt. I wish I could help. Emma's voice was thick with genuine regret. You know, I would if I had the money, and I did know that. Emma worked part-time at a local boutique while trying to establish herself as a freelance graphic designer. She lived in a studio apartment in Fremont, drove a car that was older than some of my interns, and had been asking our parents for financial help since she graduated college. The contrast between our lives had always been stark, but I never felt guilty about my success until that moment. You're helping by being here, I told her. I don't know what I'd do without you. Over the next few days, Emma became my lifeline. She fielded the awkward phone calls from relatives who'd heard about the canceled wedding. She returned the gifts that had already arrived. She even offered to handle the brutal task of calling vendors, though I insisted on doing that myself. You're being so strong, she said one evening as we shared Chinese takeout on my couch. "I don't think I could handle this as well as you are." "I'm not handling it. I'm just surviving it. Same thing sometimes." I found myself studying my sister's face in the soft light of my living room lamp. Emma had always been the prettier one, softer features, blonde hair that caught light like spun, gold, blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Men gravitated toward her natural warmth, though she'd never managed to hold on to a serious relationship. "Have you ever felt like you're living in someone else's shadow?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Just thinking about how different our lives are." She twirled lo mein around her chopsticks, not meeting my eyes. "You have everything figured out, the career, the apartment, the perfect relationship. Had the perfect relationship. My relationship just imploded. I'm hardly someone to envy right now." "But you will be. You'll bounce back from this stronger than ever. You always do." There was something in her tone that made me look at her more carefully. "Are you okay? You've been so focused on taking care of me. But how are you doing?" "I'm fine. This isn't about me." But I caught something in her expression, a flicker of something that looked almost like resentment before it disappeared behind her usual warm smile. I dismissed it as my imagination, grief, and shock were making me paranoid. 2 weeks later, I discovered Emma's diary. I was cleaning out my home office, trying to organize the chaos of canceled wedding plans and return gifts, when I found it wedged behind my desk. A small leather journal that must have fallen out of Emma's purse during one of her many visits. I should have called her immediately. Instead, I opened it. The entry was dated just 3 days after David broke up with me. Rachel is finally getting what she deserves. She's always had everything handed to her: the perfect job, the perfect apartment, the perfect fiancé. She never had to struggle for anything, never had to wonder if she was good enough. She doesn't know what it's like to be the disappointment, the one who never quite measures up. Watching her cry over David should make me feel sorry for her, but mostly I just feel relief. Maybe now she understands what it's like to lose something you love. My hands shook as I read the words. This wasn't the sister who'd held me while I cried, who'd offered to help with vendor calls and gift returns. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been harboring resentment I never suspected. But the entry that followed was even worse. David texted me today. He wants to meet for coffee to talk about Rachel. I know I should say no, but I can't help myself. There's something about the way he looks at me when Rachel isn't around, like he's really seeing me for the first time. I've always wondered what it would be like to be chosen instead of being the consolation prize. Maybe this is my chance to find out. The journal slipped from my hands, falling to the floor with a soft thud. I stared at the scattered pages, my mind struggling to process what I'd just read. Emma and David, my sister and my ex-fiancé, acute dot, the timeline clicked into place with horrible clarity. David's sudden distance, his reluctance to discuss postponing the wedding, his complete lack of emotion during our breakup. He'd already moved on to my sister. I thought about Emma's visits, her careful questions about my relationship with David, her eagerness to help with wedding cancellations. Had she been gathering information? Had every moment of comfort been a lie? My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How are you feeling today? Want to grab lunch?" I stared at the message, seeing it now for what it really was. Not concern, but reconnaissance. She was keeping tabs on me, making sure I wasn't getting too close to the truth. The sister I trusted with my deepest pain had been the architect of my destruction, and I had no idea how long she'd been planning it. The save-the-date card arrived on a Tuesday morning, mixed in with my usual stack of bills and promotional mail. Elegant cream cardstock with gold foil lettering announced, "Emma Morrison and David Chen request the honor of your presence as they celebrate their love." My hands trembled as I stared at their engagement photo. Emma, radiant in a flowing white dress, David's arms wrapped around her waist with a smile I'd never seen him wear with me. They looked happy. They looked in love. They looked like everything I thought David and I were supposed to be. The wedding date was circled in gold foil. Exactly 6 months from the day David had broken up with me. 6 months to plan the wedding I'd spent a year dreaming about. But with my sister as the bride instead of me, I called in sick to work and spent the day in bed, alternating between fury and heartbreak. How long had they been planning this? How many of Emma's consoling visits had been opportunities to gather intelligence about my relationship with David? How many times had they laughed about my obliviousness? My phone rang incessantly, friends and family who'd received the same announcement, calling to check on me. I let them all go to voicemail. I couldn't bear to hear their awkward attempts at comfort or their barely disguised curiosity about the scandalous family drama. The first person I actually answered was my mother. "Rachel, sweetheart, I just got the most surprising news. You mean the news that my sister is marrying my ex-fiancé?" I cut her off. "Yeah, I got that memo too." "Now, honey, I know this is difficult, but Emma is your sister. She's been so worried about how you'd react. Maybe you could try to be happy for them?" The audacity of it stole my breath. Happy for them. Mom, are you listening to yourself? Emma stole my fiancé, and you want me to be happy about it. She didn't steal anything. David made his choice. And Emma has struggled so much with relationships. Maybe this is her chance at happiness. What about my happiness? What about the fact that they carried on behind my back while I was planning a wedding? That's not how Emma tells it. She said they only got together after you and David broke up. They found comfort in each other during a difficult time. The lie was so polished, so perfect, that I almost admired its craftsmanship. Emma had positioned herself as the innocent party, the grieving sister who'd somehow stumbled into love with my ex-fiancé. She'd even managed to make our mother believe it. When's the last time you asked me how I was doing, Mom? When's the last time you worried about my happiness? Don't be dramatic, Rachel. You're successful, you're independent, you'll find someone else. Emma needs this more than you do. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, realizing that my mother had essentially told me that my sister's happiness mattered more than mine, that Emma needed my fiancé more than I did. The call from my father came an hour later. "Your mother is upset," he said without preamble. "She says you're not being supportive of Emma's engagement." Dad, please tell me you can see how messed up this is. I can see that your sister is finally happy, and you're making it about yourself. I'm making it about myself? They're getting married 6 months after he broke up with me. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe this is God's way of showing you that David wasn't the right man for you. I hung up on him too. The next few days brought a parade of awkward encounters. Colleagues who'd been excited about my wedding now avoided mentioning Emma's engagement. Friends who'd been planning my bachelorette party suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Even Maya, my loyal assistant, seemed uncomfortable around me. "Have you talked to Emma?" she asked carefully one afternoon. "Not yet. Maybe you should. I mean, she's still your sister." Everyone, it seemed, expected me to be the bigger person, to swallow my pain and humiliation for the sake of family harmony, to pretend that my sister marrying my ex-fiancé was just one of those crazy things that happen sometimes. The breaking point came when I ran into David at our old coffee shop near Pike Place Market. He was sitting at the table where we'd had our first date, scrolling through his phone with an expression of casual contentment. "Rachel." He looked up as I approached, not surprised to see me. "I was hoping we'd run into each other. Were you?" I sat down across from him, noting that he wasn't wearing his usual suit. Instead, he dressed down in jeans and his sweater the way he used to dress on our weekend adventures. "I want you to know that Emma and I didn't plan this. It just happened." "How?" "Convenient. We were both hurting after everything fell apart. We started talking, and we realized we had more in common than we thought." "You mean you realized she was easier to control than I was?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, David. But since when has that mattered to you?" "Look, I know you're angry, and I understand why. But Emma is your sister. She loves you, and she's scared you'll never forgive her. She should be scared. Rachel, come on. You're better than this. You're stronger than this. Emma needs your support right now." The paternalistic tone in his voice made my skin crawl. This was how he'd always spoken to me when he wanted me to back down from an argument, when he wanted me to be the reasonable one who sacrificed for everyone else's comfort. What Emma needs, I said, standing up, is to face the consequences of her choices, and so do you. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I just walked away, leaving him sitting at the table where our love story had begun and where I'd finally realized that some betrayals are too deep to forgive. The save the date card was still sitting on my kitchen counter. When I got home, I stared at their faces, so happy and carefree, and felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, but it was being joined by something else, a cold, calculating anger that I'd never felt before. If Emma and David thought they could rewrite our history and expect me to smile and play along, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The first sign that something was wrong came when I tried to pay for groceries and my credit card was declined. Standing in the checkout line at Whole Foods, I fumbled through my wallet for another card while the cashier waited with barely concealed impatience. "Try this one," I said, handing over my business credit card. Declined. "Maybe there's an issue with the reader?" I suggested. Though my stomach was already sinking, the cashier ran both cards again. Nothing. I paid with cash and left the store feeling like everyone was staring at me. Though I knew that was just paranoia talking. At home, I immediately logged into my online banking. What I saw made my blood run cold. My checking account, which should have had nearly $8,000, showed a balance of 43 cents. My savings account was completely empty. 3 months of automatic transfers had been moving money from my accounts to places I'd never authorized. I called the bank immediately. "Ms. Morrison, I see several large transfers from your accounts," the customer service representative said. "All properly authorized with your PIN and security information." I didn't authorize any transfers. "Someone has been stealing from me." "I understand your concern, but the transfers were made using your correct personal information. If you believe fraud has occurred, you'll need to file a police report and bring it to one of our branches." I hung up and stared at my laptop screen. The transactions were all electronic, made from my own IP address. Someone with access to my computer, my passwords, my personal information had been systematically draining my accounts. Someone like David, who'd had keys to my apartment and passwords to my devices, or Emma, who'd spent countless hours in my home office during the weeks after my breakup, supposedly helping me organize wedding cancellations. I pulled up the detailed transaction history and started taking screenshots. The pattern was methodical transfers of $1,500 to $2,000 every week, always on different days, always to accounts I'd never heard of. Someone had been very careful to make it look like normal activity. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Haven't heard from you in a while. Are you okay? Want to grab dinner tonight?" I stared at the message, my mind racing. If Emma was involved in this, then her continued attempts to stay close to me weren't about sisterly concern. They were about monitoring me, making sure I wasn't getting suspicious. Instead of responding to her text, I called my credit card companies. The news got worse. "Yes, Ms. Morrison, we do show several large cash advances on your account in the past 2 months," the Visa representative said. "A total of $12,000. All were processed at various ATMs using your card and PIN. I didn't make those withdrawals." "I understand, ma'am, but the transactions were made with your physical card and the correct PIN. If you're claiming fraud, you'll need to file a police report." I hung up and immediately changed all my passwords, my PINs, everything. But the damage was already done. Someone had stolen nearly $20,000 from me, and they'd been smart enough to make it look like I'd done it myself. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. David's sudden interest in my finances during our last months together, his questions about my passwords and banking information, which I answered because I trusted him. Emma's helpful presence in my home office, where I kept all my financial documents. I'd been so focused on the emotional betrayal that I missed the financial one. My laptop chimed with an email notification. The subject line made my heart stop. "Congratulations on your loan approval." I opened it with shaking hands. A personal loan for $25,000 had been approved in my name, with funds to be deposited into an account I'd never opened. The application showed all my correct personal information, including my social security number and employment details. Someone had just stolen my boyfriend and systematically drained my accounts. They'd also taken out a loan in my name. I grabbed my phone and called the lending company immediately. "I didn't apply for this loan," I told the representative. "This is identity theft." "I understand your concern, Ms. Morrison, but the application was submitted with all the correct information, including a digital signature that matches our records. The funds have already been dispersed." "Dispersed where?" "To the account you specified in your application." "I didn't specify any account. I didn't fill out any application." "Ma'am, I'm looking at your application right now. It's very thorough and complete. If you're claiming fraud, you'll need to file a police report and submit it to our fraud department." I ended the call and sat in my kitchen, staring at the evidence of what had been done to me. This wasn't just a romantic betrayal or sibling rivalry. This was a coordinated financial attack designed to destroy my life. The worst part was how clever it had been. By draining my accounts gradually and using my own devices and information, they'd made it nearly impossible for me to prove. I hadn't done it myself. And by taking out the loan, they'd ensured that even if I discovered the theft, I'd be left dealing with debt that was legally mine. I thought about Emma's diary entries, her resentment about my financial success, her belief that I'd always had everything handed to me. Had she decided to level the playing field by taking everything I worked for? My phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, you never answered my text," she said when I picked up. "I'm worried about you." "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine. You sound stressed." The concern in her voice was so convincing that for a moment, I almost believed she was innocent. But then I remembered the diary, the loan application, the systematic theft from my accounts. "Just work stuff," I said. "Nothing I can't handle." "Are you sure?" "You know you can talk to me about anything." "I know." "Good. Because I love you, Rachel. I know things have been weird between us since the engagement, but you're my sister. That's never going to change." I hung up and immediately called the police. If Emma and David thought they could destroy my life and then pretend to comfort me through the aftermath, they were about to learn that I wasn't as helpless as they believed. The officer who took my report was sympathetic, but not encouraging. "Financial fraud cases like this are tough to prosecute," he said, "especially when the perpetrator had legitimate access to your personal information. You'll need to provide extensive documentation, and even then, it's often a civil matter rather than criminal. What if I can prove who did it? Then you might have a case, but you'll need solid evidence, not just suspicion." I left the police station with a case number and a growing determination. Emma and David had stolen my money, my identity, and my trust. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They underestimated me. If they wanted to play games with my life, I was going to make sure I won. The FBI field office in Seattle was nothing like what I'd expected. Instead of the sterile, intimidating environment I'd imagined, it felt more like a busy corporate office with security guards and metal detectors. Agent Sarah Chen met me in the lobby, her professional demeanor immediately putting me at ease. "Ms. Morrison, thank you for coming in. I understand you have information about potential financial fraud." Agent Chen was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and an efficient manner that reminded me of the best account managers I'd worked with. She led me to a small conference room where another agent was waiting. "This is Agent Martinez," she said. "He specializes in financial crimes." I debated for days whether to contact the FBI. The local police had been polite but unhelpful, treating my case like a routine domestic dispute rather than serious fraud. But something about the sophistication of the theft, the gradual transfers, the loan application, the careful use of my own devices suggested this was bigger than a simple family betrayal. "Tell us about the financial irregularities you've discovered," Agent Chen said, pulling out a digital recorder. I walked them through everything: the drained accounts, the unauthorized loan, the systematic theft that had been going on for months. Agent Martinez took notes while Agent Chen asked probing questions about my relationship with David and my sister's access to my personal information. Have you noticed any other unusual activity? Agent Chen asked. New accounts opened in your name. Credit applications you didn't make? I shook my head, but her question sparked a worry I hadn't considered. Should I be checking for other things? We'll help you with that. Financial fraud like this is often more extensive than victims initially realize. Agent Martinez leaned forward. You mentioned that your ex-fiancé worked for a tech startup. What kind of work did he do? Software development, I think. He was vague about the specifics, but he mentioned working on payment processing systems. The agents exchanged a look that made my stomach clench. Ms. Morrison, what we're about to tell you needs to stay confidential, Agent Chen said. Your ex-fiancé's company has been under investigation for several months. We believe they've been operating a sophisticated money laundering operation using their payment processing platform. The room seemed to spin around me. Money laundering? They've been creating fake transactions, moving money through multiple accounts to obscure its origins. The technical knowledge required suggests someone with access to their internal systems. You think David is involved? We think David Chen and several of his colleagues have been using their technical skills to facilitate financial crimes. Your case might be connected to a much larger operation. Agent Martinez pulled out a folder. We've been tracking unusual financial patterns associated with people in David's social circle. Your sister's name came up in our preliminary investigation. Emma? How? She's been receiving regular payments from one of the accounts we're monitoring. Significant amounts, $3,000 to $5,000 per month for the past 6 months. My mind reeled. Emma had been telling everyone she was struggling financially, asking our parents for help, working part-time to make ends meet. But she'd been receiving thousands of dollars in payments from David's criminal enterprise. The payments started right around the time David began distancing himself from you, Agent Chen observed. That's not a coincidence. So this was all planned? The breakup, the engagement, everything? It looks that way. We believe your ex-fiancé needed to distance himself from you to protect the operation. Your sister's involvement gave him the perfect cover story. The betrayal felt even more devastating now. This wasn't just about Emma being jealous of my relationship or David falling out of love with me. This was about using me as a source of funds and then discarding me when I was no longer useful. What about the money they stole from me? We're tracing it now. The funds appear to have been moved through several intermediary accounts before being deposited into offshore banking systems. It's sophisticated, but not untrackable. Agent Martinez opened his laptop. We'd like your permission to monitor your electronic communications. If David and your sister are still in contact with you, we might be able to gather evidence of their ongoing criminal activity. You want me to spy on them? We want you to maintain normal contact while we monitor their communications. Don't do anything that would seem out of character, but keep talking to them. Let them think you're still in the dark about their activities. The thought of pretending to be friendly with Emma and David made my skin crawl, but I nodded. What happens if you catch them? Wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, they're looking at serious federal charges. Years in prison, significant fines, and full restitution of the money they've stolen. Agent Chen handed me a business card. This is my direct number. Call me if you notice anything unusual, any contact from David or your sister that seems suspicious. And Ms. Morrison, be careful. People involved in financial crimes can become dangerous when they feel cornered. I left the FBI office with a strange mixture of relief and terror. Relief that I hadn't been imagining things, that there really was a conspiracy against me. Terror at the scope of what David and Emma had been doing, and what they might do if they realized I was onto them. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Miss you. Want to grab lunch tomorrow and catch up. I stared at the message, knowing now that it wasn't about sisterly affection. Emma was monitoring me, making sure I wasn't getting too close to the truth. She had no idea that I was now working with federal agents to bring down her criminal operation. I typed back, would love to. Where do you want to meet? Agent Chen had told me to act normal, to keep Emma and David from suspecting anything. But as I sent the text, I realized I was no longer the naive victim who'd been blindsided by betrayal. I was now part of a federal investigation. And I was going to make sure that my sister and ex-fiancé paid for every dollar they'd stolen, every lie they told, and every moment of pain they caused. The game had changed, and they had no idea they were about to lose. The lunch with Emma was surreal. She chatted about wedding plans with an enthusiasm that would have been convincing if I hadn't known what I knew. She showed me photos of flower arrangements, talked about her dress fitting, and asked for my opinion on centerpieces as if we were just two sisters sharing an exciting moment. I found the most beautiful venue, she said, scrolling through pictures on her phone. It's this historic mansion on Vashon Island. David thinks it's too expensive, but I told him we only get married once, right? The irony wasn't lost on me. They were planning to pay for their dream wedding with money stolen from me. It looks lovely, I managed to say. I know this is weird for you, Rachel, but I really want you to be part of the wedding. Maybe you could do a reading or help me with my vows. The audacity of it took my breath away. She wanted me to participate in celebrating her marriage to my ex-fiancé, funded by my stolen money. I'll think about it, I said, forcing a smile. After lunch, I drove to my parents' house in Bellevue. If I was going to understand Emma's motivations, I needed to dig deeper into our family history. The FBI had suggested that financial crimes often have emotional roots, and Emma's diary had hinted at resentments. I never fully understood that my mother was in our garden when I arrived, tending to the rose bush she'd been nurturing for 20 years. She looked up with surprise when she saw me. Rachel? This is unexpected. Are you here to talk about Emma's wedding? Because I really think I'm here to talk about Emma, I interrupted, but not about the wedding. Mom's face tightened. What do you mean? I want to understand why Emma hates me so much. Why she's always resented my success, my relationships, my life. She doesn't hate you. She loves you. You're her sister. Mom, she's marrying my ex-fiancé. Normal sisters don't do that. My mother set down her gardening shears and really looked at me for the first time in months. You think Emma planned this? You think she set out to hurt you? I think Emma has been competing with me our entire lives, and this is just the latest round. That's not fair, Rachel. Emma has struggled with things that came easily to you. She's always felt like she had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. What things? What did I get that she didn't? Mom was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. Maybe it's time you knew the truth about your sister. She led me inside to the living room, where photo albums were scattered across the coffee table. I recognized them as the ones she'd been organizing for months, part of her retirement project to digitize our family history. Emma came to us when she was 6 months old, Mom said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean came to you? She was adopted. We've been trying to have another baby for years after you were born, but it wasn't happening. Then the adoption agency called about Emma, and we fell in love with her immediately. I stared at the baby photos, scattered across the table, seeing Emma's face in a completely different light. She was adopted? Why didn't you ever tell me? We planned to tell both of you when you were older, but the right time never seemed to come, and as the years passed, it felt less important. She was our daughter, just like you were. But she wasn't, was she? Not really, don't say that. Mom's voice was sharp. Emma is every bit as much our daughter as you are. But even as she said it, I could see the truth in her eyes. Emma had been different, treated differently, held to different standards. Not because she was adopted, but because my parents had always been slightly more careful with her. Slightly more protective, slightly more willing to excuse her failures. Where are her birth parents? Her mother was very young, barely 18. She couldn't take care of a baby. We never knew much about the father. Does Emma know? She found out when she was 16. She was applying for a passport and needed her birth certificate. We had to tell her then. The pieces were falling into place. Emma had learned she was adopted during her junior year of high school, right around the time she'd started pulling away from me. I'd attributed her mood changes to typical teenage angst, but it had been something much deeper. How did she react? She was angry. She felt like we'd lied to her, like her whole life was built on a lie. She started acting out, her grades dropped. She got involved with some questionable friends. And you blame me for that too, didn't you? Mom looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? You blame me for being the real daughter, for having what Emma couldn't have. That's why you always made excuses for her behavior. Why you always expected me to be the understanding one. That's not true, isn't it? When Emma dropped out of college, you told me I should be more supportive. When she couldn't hold down a job, you said I should help her network. When she was broke, you suggested I loan her money. But what did you ever ask her to do for me? My mother's silence was answer enough. She knew she was adopted, and you knew she knew, but you all kept pretending it didn't matter, except it did matter, didn't it? It mattered to Emma. We just wanted her to feel secure, to feel like she belonged. So you made me the villain, the privileged biological daughter who had everything handed to her. No one made you the villain. Rachel, then explain to me why Emma thinks she deserves my fiancé. Explain to me why you think I should be happy about her stealing the most important relationship in my life. Mom was quiet for a long time, staring at the scattered photos. Emma has always felt like she was on the outside looking in. When she was little, she used to ask why she didn't look like us, why her hair was blonde when ours was brown. We told her she was special, that we chose her while we just got stuck with you. You told her you chose her? We thought it would make her feel wanted, but I could see how that would have backfired. Instead of feeling special, Emma would have felt like she had to earn her place in our family while I got to take mine for granted. She's been trying to prove she deserves to be here her whole life, I said quietly. Maybe, but that doesn't excuse what she's done to you, doesn't it? From her perspective, she's finally getting what she's always deserved. A life as good as mine. I looked at the photos again, seeing our childhood through Emma's eyes. Every family vacation, every birthday party, every holiday celebration would have been a reminder that she didn't really belong, that she was the outsider who'd been graciously allowed to join our family. And I'd been the constant reminder of what she could never be, the biological daughter, who never had to question her place in our parents' hearts. I need to see her birth certificate, I said. Rachel, I don't think that's... I need to see it, Mom. All of it. She disappeared upstairs and came back with a folder of documents. Emma's amended birth certificate showed her adoptive. Parents, my parents, but clipped to it was her original birth certificate. The mother's name was listed as Jennifer Walsh, age 18. The father's name was blank, but there was something else. Note from the adoption agency attached to the file. I read it twice before the implications sank in. The birth mother requested that the child be placed with a family that already had children, preferably a daughter close in age. She felt this would provide the best environment for the child's development. Emma hadn't just been adopted into our family randomly. Her birth mother had specifically requested that she be placed with a family that had a daughter like me. Emma had been chosen to be my sister. But she'd spent her entire life feeling like she was competing for a place that was never really hers. And now, finally, she'd found a way to win. Agent Chen called me the next morning with news that made my blood run cold. We've traced the money from your accounts, she said. It's been moved through a network of shell companies, all registered to fake businesses. Your ex-fiancé and sister have been running a sophisticated operation. I was in my office, supposedly reviewing campaign proposals for a new client, but I'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. What kind of operation? They've been creating fraudulent companies, opening business accounts, and moving stolen money through multiple layers to make it untraceable. The technical term is layered money laundering, and it requires significant planning and coordination. Agent Chen sent me a file containing business registration documents that made my head spin. Northwest Digital Solutions, Pacific Tech Consulting. Emerald City Payment processing a dozen companies with official-looking paperwork, all registered to addresses that didn't exist or led to mail forwarding services. Emma is listed as CEO of 3 of these companies, Agent Chen continued. David is the technical officer for 5 others. They've been using these fake businesses to process credit card transactions, take out business loans, and move money internationally. How long have they been doing this? Based on the registration dates, at least 80 months. This started long before David broke up with you. The timeline hit me like a punch to the gut. While I'd been planning our wedding, choosing flowers and cake flavors, David had been planning to destroy my financial life. Every romantic dinner, every lazy Sunday morning, every conversation about our future had been happening while he was setting up the infrastructure to rob me blind. The loan they took out in your name? Agent Chen said. That money went directly into one of their shell companies and was immediately transferred offshore. We were working with international authorities to trace it, but recovery is going to be difficult. What about the money they stole from my bank accounts? Some of it we can trace. It's been used to fund their other operations, pay for the wedding, venue, and support what appears to be a fairly expensive lifestyle. Your sister has been shopping at high-end stores, taking trips, living well beyond her supposed means. I thought about Emma's complaints about money, her requests for help from our parents, her part-time job at the boutique. All of it had been an elaborate lie while she was actually pulling in thousands of dollars per month from their criminal enterprise. There's something else, Agent Chen said. We have been monitoring communications between David and several other individuals. It appears this operation is larger than just your sister and ex-fiancé. They're part of a network that's been targeting people in tech and finance sectors across the Pacific Northwest. Other people like me? Professional women with good credit, stable incomes, and access to financial resources. The pattern is always the same. Romantic relationships are used to gain access to personal information. Then the targets are systematically robbed and discarded. The room spun around me. How many others? We've identified at least 6 other victims in the past 2 years. All of them were in relationships with men connected to David's tech company. All of them had their identities stolen and their accounts drained. I felt sick. David hadn't just betrayed me personally. He'd been running a predatory operation targeting successful women, using romance as a weapon to destroy their lives. The engagement to your sister serves multiple purposes, Agent Chen explained. It provides David with a legitimate reason for having access to your personal information through family connections. It also gives them a cover story for any financial connections between them that we might discover. And if anyone asks why Emma suddenly has money for an expensive wedding, her loving fiancé is providing for her. It's the perfect cover. I stared at the business registration documents, seeing David's signature on form after form. His handwriting, which I'd once found charming when he left me love notes, now looked sinister as it authorized fake companies designed to launder stolen money. What about Emma? Was she involved from the beginning? Based on the timeline, we believe she was recruited after David identified you as a target. Her adoption history and psychological profile would have made her susceptible to manipulation. Psychological profile? David's operation is sophisticated. They don't just target victims randomly, they study their personal relationships, identify vulnerabilities, and exploit them. Your sister's feelings of inadequacy and resentment toward you made her a perfect accomplice. The calculation behind it all was breathtaking. David hadn't fallen out of love with me. He'd never loved me at all. I'd been a mark, a target, a source of funds to be systematically exploited. And Emma hadn't stolen my fiancé in a moment of passion or jealousy. She'd been recruited into a criminal enterprise that used her psychological wounds as motivation. Are they planning to run after the wedding? We think so. There's evidence they've been preparing for significant money movement right after their honeymoon. We believe they're planning to disappear with everything they've stolen, starting new lives somewhere without extradition treaties. Agent Chen sent me another file travel confirmations for Emma and David's honeymoon. But instead of the romantic getaway to Italy that Emma had told me about, they'd booked one-way tickets to several different countries with no return flights scheduled. "They're never coming back," I said. "Not if their plan works. They'll get married, transfer the remaining funds offshore during their honeymoon, and disappear. By the time anyone realizes what happened, they'll be untouchable." I thought about my parents, who were so proud of Emma's engagement, who'd been planning to pay for part of the wedding. They had no idea that their adopted daughter was about to vanish from their lives forever, leaving behind only financial devastation and broken hearts. What happens now? We continue gathering evidence. We monitor their communications, track their financial movements, and prepare for arrests. But we need to be careful. If they suspect we're onto them, they might accelerate their timeline and disappear before we can stop them. How long do we have? The wedding is in 6 weeks. Based on their travel plans, we estimate they'll make their move within 72 hours of the ceremony. We'll need to arrest them before they board those flights. I hung up and sat in my office, surrounded by the normal trappings of my professional life, trying to process the scope of what had been done to me. This wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was an elaborate criminal conspiracy that had been planned and executed with military precision. David had never loved me. Emma had never cared about me. Everything I believed about my life, my relationships, my family had been built on lies, designed to make me easier to rob. But now I knew the truth. And in 6 weeks, I was going to watch them both get exactly what they deserved. That evening, I pulled out my high school yearbook for the first time in years. The pages were yellowed and the binding was cracked, but the photos told a story I'd never fully understood until now. There was Emma at homecoming wearing a dress, almost identical to one I'd worn to a formal dance the year before. Emma at graduation in jewelry that looked suspiciously like pieces from my collection. Emma with my friends, at my parties, always hovering at the edges of my life like she was trying to step into it. I thought it was sweet at the time. My little sister wanting to be like me. Now I could see it for what it really was, a pattern of appropriation that had been going on for over a decade. The more I looked, the clearer it became. In group photos, Emma positioned herself to block me or stand slightly in front. In candid shots, she was often touching or holding something that belonged to me. Even her signature in my yearbook was telling, "To my amazing sister, I hope someday I can be just like you. Love, Emma." Not, "I'm proud of you," or "You inspire me." She wanted to be me. I found my phone and scrolled through old social media posts, looking for patterns I'd missed. There it was, Emma liking every post about my relationship with David, commenting enthusiastically about our plans, always asking for details about our dates and future together. She'd been studying my relationship like a blueprint on my laptop. Chimed with a video call from Emma. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but Agent Chen's instructions echoed in my mind. Act normal. Gather information. Don't let them know you're suspicious. "Hey!" Emma's face filled my screen, radiant with happiness. She was in what looked like a bridal boutique, surrounded by white fabric and mirrors. "I'm at my final dress fitting. Want to see?" The audacity of it took my breath away. She was calling to show off the wedding dress for her marriage to my ex-fiancé, funded by money stolen from me. Sure, I managed. Emma stepped back from the camera, revealing a stunning gown that made my heart stop. It was nearly identical to the dress I'd chosen. For my own wedding, the same silhouette, the same lace details, even the same pearl buttons down the back. "What do you think?" she asked, spinning around. "David says it's perfect." Of course it was perfect. It was my dress, or close enough to make no difference. She'd taken my fiancé, my money, and now my wedding dress design. "It's beautiful," I sighed, my voice barely steady. "I know this is hard for you, Rachel, but I really hope you'll be there. It wouldn't be the same without my sister." The word sister felt like a slap. We both knew what she'd done to me, but she was still playing the role of a loving sibling who just happened to find happiness with my ex. "Where's the ceremony again?" I asked, fishing for information. "Chateau Saint Michel. David wanted somewhere special, and I've always dreamed of getting married in a vineyard." Another detail stolen from my wedding plans. David and I had toured that venue during our engagement, and I mentioned how romantic it would be to exchange vows among the grapevines. "When do you leave for your honeymoon?" The day after the wedding, we're going to Italy, Rome, Florence, Venice. David surprised me with the whole itinerary. The lie came so easily to her that I almost believed it myself. But I knew the truth. They were planning to disappear, to start new lives with money stolen from me and other victims. That sounds wonderful, I said. I have to go, the seamstress is waiting. But Rachel, I love you. I know you think I stole David from you, but that's not how it happened. We just found each other when we were both lost. She ended the call before I could respond, leaving me staring at my reflection in the laptop screen. I looked pale, haunted, like someone who'd been stripped of everything she'd once believed about her life. But I wasn't the same naive woman who'd been blindsided by David's breakup 3 months ago. I was someone who'd learned to see through lies, to recognize manipulation, to fight back against people who thought they could destroy me. I opened my yearbook again, but this time I wasn't looking for evidence of Emma's obsession. I was looking for evidence of my own strength. There I was as student body president, leading meetings and organizing events. There I was accepting academic awards, scholarships, recognition for achievements that no one had handed to me. There I was with real friends who'd chosen to be in my life, not because they wanted something from me, but because they genuinely cared about me. Emma had spent years trying to become me, but she'd missed the most important part. I'd earned everything. I had. My success, my relationships, my happiness, none of it had been given to me. I worked for it, fought for it, deserved it, and I wasn't going to let her take it away. I called Agent Chen. I need to know everything, I said when she answered. Every detail about their operation, every victim they've targeted, every crime they've committed. If I'm going to help you catch them, I need to understand exactly what they've done. Rachel, I appreciate your willingness to help, but you need to be careful. These people have already demonstrated they're willing to destroy lives for money. If they realize you're onto them, they won't realize anything. I'm going to be the perfect sister, the understanding ex-girlfriend, right up until the moment. You put handcuffs on them. What changed your mind? I looked at my yearbook, at the photos of the person I'd been before David and Emma tried to break me. I remembered who I am, I said. And I decided it's time they learned that lesson too. The wedding planning folder Emma showed me was like looking at my own dreams repackaged with someone else's name on them. Every detail from the ivory roses and baby's breath centerpieces to the string quartet playlist had been lifted directly. From the wedding I'd spent months planning with David. I found the most amazing caterer, Emma gushed as we sat in her apartment, surrounded by vendor contracts and fabric samples. They do this incredible salmon with herb butter that David just loves. I knew about the salmon. David and I had tasted it together at a wedding expo, and he'd specifically requested it for our reception menu. That sounds delicious, I said, taking photos of the catering contract with my phone. Agent Chen had asked me to document everything, looking for evidence of how they were funding their elaborate celebration. The costs were staggering. $40,000 for the venue alone. Another $15,000 for flowers. $20,000 for photography and videography. Emma was planning a wedding that would cost more than many people's annual salaries, all while supposedly working part-time at a boutique. How are you managing to afford all this? I asked as casually as I could. David's been saving up, Emma said, not meeting my eyes. Plus his company gave him a big bonus for the merger project. He says nothing's too good for his bride. Another lie wrapped in romantic packaging. The merger project had been covered for David's money laundering operation, and the bonus was money stolen from victims like me. Emma pulled out her phone and started scrolling through photos. Want to see my dress one more time? I took some pictures at the fitting. But as she scrolled, I caught a glimpse of something that made my blood freeze. It was a screenshot of a receipt not for a wedding dress, but for a purchase at an online store. The timestamp showed it was from 3 months ago, right after David broke up with me. Emma, can you go back to that photo? Which one? The one with the receipt. I think you scrolled past it. Her cheeks flushed. Oh, that's nothing. Just some stuff I bought online. But she'd scrolled too quickly for me to miss it completely. The receipt was from a specialty bridal store, and the item description read, Vintage inspired Align gown with pearl detail ivory. The exact description of the dress I'd chosen for my wedding to David. "You bought your dress 3 months ago?" I asked quietly. Emma's face went pale. Yes, I saw it online and fell in love with it. It was on sale and I thought maybe someday ... Someday what, Emma? Someday I'd find someone to marry. I didn't know it would be David. I didn't know. We fall in love. The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. Emma had bought her wedding dress before David even broke up with me. She'd been planning this wedding while I was still engaged to him. That's quite a coincidence, I said. Finding a dress. And then finding the groom. Life is funny that way. I wanted to scream at her, to demand the truth, to force her to admit what she'd done. But Agent Chen's words echoed in my mind. Stay calm, gather evidence. Don't let them know you're suspicious. Instead, I smiled and nodded. It's beautiful. You're going to look stunning. Emma relaxed visibly. I'm so glad you approve. Your opinion means everything to me. We spent the next hour going through more details, and with each revelation, the scope of Emma's deception became clearer. She'd not only copied my wedding plans, she'd improved on them. The flowers were more expensive, the venue more exclusive. The menu more elaborate. She was getting the wedding I dreamed of, but bigger and better, funded by money stolen from me. There's one more thing I want to show you, Emma said, pulling out a leather portfolio. I've been working on my vows. She handed me a handwritten page, and as I read it, my heart shattered all over again. David, 3 years ago, I watched my sister fall in love with you, and I was so happy for her. I thought she'd found her soulmate, her perfect match. But as I got to know you better, I realized that what I was seeing wasn't just compatibility, it was recognition. You were the man I'd been waiting for my whole life, even when I didn't know it. The vows continued, painting a picture of destined love that had overcome obstacles and found its way despite the odds. Emma described watching David and me together and slowly realizing that he was meant to be with her instead. But the most devastating part was how she twisted our family history into her love story. I've spent my whole life wondering where I've belonged, feeling like I was on the outside looking in at other people's happiness. But when I look at you, I see home. I see the family I was always meant to have, the love I was always meant to find. You chose me, David, not because you had Tio, but because you wanted to. And that choice has made me feel truly worthy of love for the first time in my life. She'd turned her adoption trauma into a romantic narrative, positioning herself as the victim who'd finally found happiness by stealing my fiancé. What do you think? She asked eagerly. They're very moving, I managed. I want our wedding to be perfect. I want everyone to see how much we love each other, how right this is. I handed back the vows, my hand shaking slightly. I'm sure it will be beautiful. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. I know this is hard for you, Rachel, but I hope someday you'll understand that this is how it was supposed to be. David and I were meant to find each other. Maybe you're right, I said. But as I looked at my sister, this woman who'd systematically stolen my identity, my money, my future, and was now planning to disappear forever, I knew exactly how this was supposed to end. Not with her getting everything she'd stolen from me, but with her finally facing the consequences of her choices. 6 weeks until their wedding. 6 weeks until justice. The FBI Seattle field office had become my second home over the past month. I spent hours in conference rooms with Agent Chen and Agent Martinez, poring over financial records, wire transfer documentation, and evidence of the systematic theft that had destroyed not just my life, but the lives of 6 other women. Look at this pattern, Agent Martinez said, spreading bank statements across the table. David Chen targeted women in specific industries, tech, finance, marketing. All of them had access to corporate accounts or significant personal assets. The files contained photos of the other victims, and seeing their faces made my stomach clench. They looked like me, successful, professional women in their 20s and 30s who thought they'd found love, only to discover they'd been marked for financial destruction. Sarah Kim, software engineer at Microsoft. Lost $35,000 from personal accounts plus another $50,000 in fraudulent business loans taken out in her name. Agent Chen read from the file. Jennifer Walsh, investment banker at a local firm. They drained her accounts and used her credentials to access client funds before she caught on. Jennifer Walsh, I repeated. That name sounds familiar. Agent Chen looked up. It should. According to our research, Jennifer Walsh was also your sister's birth mother. The room went silent. Emma's birth mother was one of David's victims? We think that's how David first learned about Emma. He was in a relationship with Jennifer Walsh 2 years ago, gained access to her personal information, including adoption records. That's how he discovered your sister's existence and her connection to you. The implications hit me like a freight train. David hadn't just randomly chosen me as a target. He'd specifically sought me out because of Emma, and he hadn't recruited Emma by accident. He'd been planning to use her against me from the beginning. Jennifer Walsh was the investment banker? Yes, David destroyed her financially and professionally. She lost her job, her savings, and her reputation. Last we heard, she was working retail in Portland, still trying to rebuild her life. I thought about Emma's birth mother, a teenager who'd given up her baby to provide a better life, only to have that same baby used as a weapon against another victim decades later. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Does Emma know about her birth mother being a victim? We don't think so. But David definitely knows. He's been methodical about targeting women connected to previous victim sisters, friends, colleagues. It's like he's building a network of destruction. Agent Martinez pulled out another set of documents. The wire transfers from your accounts show sophisticated laundering techniques. Money goes from your bank to a shell company, then to an offshore account, then back to another shell company before finally ending up in accounts controlled by David and Emma. Can you trace where it ended up? Some of it. They've been using the money to fund their operation renting office space for fake companies, purchasing equipment for credit card skimming, and maintaining the lifestyle that makes them appear successful to new targets. Agent Chen showed me surveillance photos taken outside David's apartment building. Emma was clearly visible in several shots, carrying shopping bags from expensive stores, wearing jewelry I'd never seen before, looking like a woman who had money to burn. They've been living well off your money and the money from other victims. The wedding alone is costing more than most people make in a year. What about the offshore accounts? Those are harder to access, but we're working with international authorities. If we can arrest them before they disappear, we might be able to recover some of the stolen funds. The evidence was overwhelming, but Agent Chen warned me that building a prosecutable case would take time. We need to catch them in the act of moving money or preparing to flee. Right now, they could claim the money was gifts, that the shell companies were legitimate business ventures, that everything was consensual. Even the identity theft? David had access to your personal information through your relationship. Emma had access through family connections. Co-defense attorneys could argue that you gave them permission to access your accounts. The legal realities were frustrating, but I understood the strategy. We needed to catch them red-handed, not just with evidence of past crimes, but proof of ongoing criminal activity. That's where you come in, Agent Martinez said. We need you to maintain contact with them to gather information about their timeline and their escape plans. What kind of information? When they plan to transfer the remaining money offshore, what their travel plans really are. Whether they're planning to maintain the shell companies after they disappear. Agent Chen handed me a small device that looked like a flash drive. This is a recording device. If you can get either of them to talk about their activities, we can use those recordings as evidence. Is this legal? You're not a law enforcement officer, and you'll be recording conversations you're part of. As long as you don't break any laws to obtain the recordings, they're admissible. I stared at the device, realizing I was about to become an undercover operative in the investigation of my own family. There's something else, Agent Chen said quietly. We've been monitoring David's communications, and he's been in contact with someone in the Philippines. We think they might be planning to relocate there after the wedding. The Philippines? No extradition treaty with the United States for financial crimes. If they get there with the stolen money, we'll never be able to touch them. The urgency of the situation crystallized for me. This wasn't just about getting justice for what they'd done. It was about preventing them from disappearing forever and doing this to other victims. What do you need me to do? Keep being the supportive sister and understanding ex-girlfriend. But start asking more questions about their future plans, their finances, their timeline. We need to know exactly when they plan to make their move. I left the FBI office with the recording device hidden in my purse and a new sense of purpose. Emma and David thought they'd broken me, turned me into a victim who would quietly accept her fate. While they rode off into the sunset with my money, they had no idea they'd actually turned me into the instrument of their own destruction. The opportunity came when Emma called me in tears, claiming she needed my help with a wedding emergency. David was supposedly being difficult about the honeymoon plans, and she needed someone to talk to. We met at her apartment where she poured wine and launched into what seemed like a genuine emotional breakdown. But I'd learned not to trust anything Emma showed me. He's being so secretive about the travel arrangements, she sobbed. He says it's a surprise, but I feel like he's hiding something from me. What kind of surprise? I asked, activating the recording device in my purse. I don't know. He booked everything himself, won't let me see the itinerary, won't even tell me what to pack. What if he's planning something I won't like? I pretended to consider this. Maybe he's just trying to be romantic. Some men think mystery is sexy. But what if it's not Italy like he told everyone? What if he's taking me somewhere awful? Emma, if you're really worried, why don't you just ask to see the tickets? I tried. He said they're electronic and he has them on his phone. But Rachel, what if he's lying to me? The irony of Emma worrying about being lied to wasn't lost on me, but I maintained my sympathetic expression. Have you seen any confirmation emails? Travel bookings usually generate a lot of paperwork. That's just it. I haven't seen anything. No hotel confirmations, no rental car bookings, nothing. It's like he's planning the whole trip in secret. I leaned forward, playing the concerned sister. Emma, has David ever lied to you about anything else? Her face went pale. What do you mean? I just mean you had concerns about him being secretive. Has he been secretive about other things? No, she said quickly. Well, maybe about work sometimes, but that's normal, right? His company has confidentiality agreements. What kind of work has he been doing lately? The usual? Software development, consulting projects. He's been really busy with this new client. Do you know who the client is? Emma hesitated. Some international company. He said he couldn't tell me the details because of the NDA. International work usually pays well. Is that how you're affording such an expensive wedding? David's been saving money for years. And he got a big bonus from the merger. The lies came so smoothly that I wondered if Emma even knew they were lies anymore. Or maybe she convinced herself that David's criminal activities were legitimate business ventures. Emma, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy? Really, truly happy? Her eyes filled with tears again. I should be. I'm marrying the man I love. We're having a beautiful wedding. We're going on an amazing honeymoon. But sometimes I feel like it's all too good to be true. What do you mean? I keep waiting for something to go wrong. For David to change his mind, for you to hate me forever, for Mom and Dad to realize they love you more than me. The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. For a moment, she sounded like the insecure little girl who discovered she was adopted, not the criminal who'd systematically destroyed my life. Emma, do you ever regret how this all happened? Taking David away from me? I didn't take him away from you, she said defensively. He came to me, he chose me. But you knew. I was in love with him. You knew it would hurt me. And you've had everything your whole life? The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the anger underneath. You've never had to wonder if you were good enough, if you deserve love, if your own family really wanted you. So you decided I deserved to lose everything? You didn't lose everything, you lost to a man. I lost my whole identity when I found out I was adopted. Emma, being adopted doesn't give you the right to steal from me. I'm not stealing anything. David loves me. He wants to marry me. He wants to build a life with me. What kind of life? Where are you planning to live after the wedding? We haven't decided yet. David wants to travel for a while, maybe work remotely, from different countries. For how long? I don't know. Maybe a year, maybe longer. He says we should enjoy being young and free before we settle down. The pieces were falling into place. Emma genuinely believed they were going on an extended honeymoon, not fleeing the country permanently. David had convinced her they were starting a romantic adventure together, not running from federal authorities. That sounds expensive. How are you planning to fund a year of international travel? David says he has it all figured out. He's been investing in cryptocurrency and some other projects. He says we'll have enough money to live comfortably anywhere we want. Cryptocurrency investments? I don't really understand it, but he shows me these accounts with lots of numbers. He says it's our future. I felt a chill. David was showing Emma cryptocurrency accounts as proof of their financial security, but those accounts were likely filled with laundered money from their victims. Emma, have you seen David's passport recently? His passport? Why? I'm just wondering if it's current. International travel requires up-to-date documentation. I think so. He's been carrying it around lately, along with some other important papers. He says he wants to make sure everything's ready for the trip. What other papers? I don't know. Bank stuff? Investment documents? He keeps them in a briefcase that he takes everywhere. Agent Chen had been right. David was preparing for their disappearance, keeping all the critical documents close at hand. But Emma seemed genuinely oblivious to the real nature of their plans. Emma, I want you to promise me something. What? If anything feels wrong during your honeymoon, if David starts acting strange or asking you to do things that make you uncomfortable, call me immediately. Why would you say that? Because I love you. And despite everything that's happened between us, I don't want anything bad to happen to you. For a moment, I meant it. Looking at Emma's confused, frightened face, I felt a flicker of the sisterly protectiveness I'd always felt for her. She was a criminal who'd destroyed my life, but she was also a victim of David's manipulation. Nothing bad is going to happen, she said softly. David loves me. He would never hurt me. I hope you're right. But as I left her apartment with the recording device full of incriminating evidence, I knew Emma was about to learn the same lesson. I had that David Chen was incapable of love. Only exploitation. The difference was that when Emma learned that lesson, she'd be learning it from inside a federal prison cell. The wedding program arrived in my mailbox 3 days before the ceremony. An elegant ivory card with gold script announcing the union of Emma Morrison and David Chen. The order of service was laid out in beautiful calligraphy processional. Readings, vows, rings, pronouncement, recessional. A perfect traditional ceremony that would end with federal arrests instead of wedding cake. Agent Chen called me that morning with final details about the operation. We'll have agents positioned throughout the venue, she said. Some will be dressed as guests, others as vendors. The arrest will happen immediately after the ceremony, before they can leave for their honeymoon. What about the other guests? My parents will be there. We'll minimize disruption as much as possible. But this is a federal arrest. There will be some chaos. I thought about my parents, who were so proud of Emma's wedding, who'd been planning this day for months. They had no idea they were about to watch their daughter get arrested for federal crimes. Have you confirmed their travel plans? David purchased tickets to Bangkok this morning, one way, departing tomorrow evening. That's our confirmation that they're planning to flee immediately after the wedding. Thailand. Not Italy, not a romantic honeymoon, but a country with limited extradition agreements and a place where stolen money could disappear forever. What about Emma? Does she know about the real travel plans? Based on your recordings, we believe she thinks they're going to Italy for 2 weeks. David has been lying to her about their actual destination. The betrayal went even deeper than I'd imagined. David wasn't just using Emma to steal from me. He was also lying to her about their future together. She thought she was getting a fairy tale ending, but she was actually being used as an accessory to federal crimes. Rachel, I need to prepare you for what's going to happen tomorrow. Agent Chen said. When we arrest them, Emma is going to be confused and frightened. She might look to you for help or explanation. What am I supposed to say to her? Nothing. You can't interfere with the arrest, and you can't try to explain what's happening. Let us handle it. And after. What happens to Emma after she's arrested? That depends on how cooperative she is. If she helps us recover the stolen money and testifies about David's operation, she might get a reduced sentence. If she maintains her innocence or refuses to cooperate, she faces the full weight of federal charges. I spent the rest of the day preparing myself emotionally for what was about to happen. Tomorrow, I would watch my sister marry my ex-fiancé, knowing it was all an elaborate lie. I would sit in that chapel and pretend to be the supportive family member while federal agents prepared to destroy their lives. The irony wasn't lost on me that Emma had invited me to witness her triumph, never imagining that I would actually be there to witness her downfall. That evening, David called me unexpectedly. Rachel, I hope this isn't weird, but I wanted to talk to you before the wedding. What about? I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. The way things ended between us, the way Emma and I got together, I know it looks terrible. It looks like what it is, David. I loved you, Rachel. I want you to know that. But sometimes people grow apart, and sometimes other people come into your life who make you realize what you were missing. The manipulation in his voice was subtle, but unmistakable. Even now, on the eve of his arrest, he was trying to rewrite history to make himself look sympathetic. Is there a point to this call? I just want you to be happy for us tomorrow. Emma loves you so much, and it would mean everything to her to have your blessing. My blessing? I know we've hurt you, but Emma is your sister. She deserves to be happy. The audacity was breathtaking. He was asking me to bless their marriage while he was preparing to flee the country with money stolen from me. David, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you planning to have children with Emma? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Eventually, maybe. Why? Just curious about your future plans. Where do you see yourselves in 5 years? Traveling. Probably seeing the world. We want to experience life before we settle down. More lives. In 5 years, David was planning to be living under a fake identity in a country without extradition, while Emma would likely be in federal prison. That sounds wonderful, I said. I hope everything works out exactly the way you've planned. Thank you, Rachel. That means a lot. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment looking at the wedding program, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, I'd been planning my own wedding to David, believing in our future together. Now I was preparing to watch him marry my sister, knowing it would end with their arrest for federal crimes. The woman who'd been devastated by David's betrayal was gone. In her place was someone stronger, smarter, and absolutely determined to see justice done. Tomorrow, Emma would get her perfect wedding right up until the moment she learned that fairy tales don't exist, and that actions have consequences. I went to bed early, setting my alarm for dawn. I had a wedding to attend, and I wanted to look my best for the occasion. After all, it would be the last time I'd see my sister and ex-fiancé as free people. The last chapter of their story was about to be written, and for the first time in months, I was going to be the one holding the pen. I arrived at Chateau Saint Michel 30 minutes before the ceremony, wearing a navy blue dress that struck the perfect balance between appropriate and memorable. The vineyard was stunning in the late afternoon light, with rows of grapevines stretching toward the mountains and the historic chateau, providing an elegant backdrop for what should have been a fairy tale wedding. Emma had spared no expense. White roses and baby's breath adorned every surface. String lights twinkled from the trees, and guests were already gathering on the terrace with glasses of champagne. It was everything I dreamed of for my own wedding, executed with a level of luxury I never could have afforded. Luxury paid for with money stolen from me. I spotted Agent Chen near the gift table, dressed as a wedding coordinator with a clipboard and earpiece. Agent Martinez was among the catering staff, adjusting flower arrangements while keeping watch over the proceedings. At least 6 other agents were scattered throughout the crowd, invisible unless you knew what to look for. Rachel. My mother appeared at my elbow, radiant with happiness. Doesn't everything look beautiful? Emma has such wonderful taste. It's lovely, I agreed, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter who was probably also an FBI agent. I'm so proud of her. After all her struggles, she's finally found her happiness. The innocence in my mother's voice was heartbreaking. She had no idea that her adopted daughter was about to be arrested for federal crimes, that the beautiful wedding she'd helped plan was funded by theft and fraud. Where's Dad? With David and the groomsmen, they're taking photos by the wine barrels. David looks so handsome in his tuxedo. I scanned the crowd, noting the positioning of the federal agents and the escape routes they'd blocked. Emma and David had no idea they were surrounded. There's the bride. Someone called out. Emma emerged from the chateau in her wedding dress, and even knowing what I knew, I had to admit she looked stunning. The gown was identical to the one I'd chosen, but she wore it with a confidence and joy that transformed it into something entirely her own. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and she carried a bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus that perfectly complemented the vineyard setting. "Oh, sweetheart, you look perfect," Mom said, rushing to embrace her. Emma's eyes found mine over our mother's shoulder. "Rachel, you came." "Of course I came. You're my sister." For a moment, her composure wavered. "I wasn't sure you would. I know this is hard for you." "It's your wedding day," I said. "Nothing else matters." The photographer captured the moment Emma in her wedding dress, surrounded by family, glowing with happiness. In a few hours, that photo would seem like evidence from another universe. The ceremony began at sunset, with guests gathering on the terrace overlooking the vineyards. I took a seat in the third row, close enough to see everything but far enough. Back to avoid the initial chaos when the arrests happened, David stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking every inch the successful tech executive. He'd gotten a haircut and appeared relaxed, confident, like a man about to start the next chapter of his perfect life. He had no idea it would be his last day of freedom. The processional began with a string quartet playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, the same piece I'd chosen for my own wedding processional. Emma's bridesmaids walked down the aisle in flowing lavender dresses, followed by the flower girl and ring bearer. Then Emma appeared at the back of the aisle on our father's arm, and the entire gathering rose to their feet. She was radiant, absolutely glowing with happiness as she walked toward David. For those few moments, watching her process down the aisle, I almost forgot about the federal agents positioned around the perimeter. She looked like every bride's dream of herself on her wedding day. David's face when he saw her was a masterpiece of performed emotion. He smiled, wiped away what might have been a tear, and reached for her hand as our father placed it in his. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed in their love story completely. The officiant began the ceremony with traditional words about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Emma and David gazed into each other's eyes with what appeared to be genuine adoration. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Emma and David in holy matrimony." I glanced around the crowd, noting that the FBI agents remained perfectly positioned, but appeared completely relaxed. This was going to happen exactly as planned. The ceremony continued with readings from Emma's college roommate and one of David's groomsmen. Then came the moment I'd been dreading, the exchange of personal vows. Emma went first, pulling out the handwritten pages I'd seen in her apartment. "David, 3 years ago, I watched my sister fall in love with you, and I was so happy for her. But as I got to know you better, I realized that what I was seeing wasn't just compatibility, it was recognition. You were the man I'd been waiting for my whole life." The words hit differently hearing them spoken aloud at the altar. Emma's voice was strong and clear, filled with conviction and emotion. She truly believed every word she was saying. I've spent my whole life wondering where I belonged, feeling like I was on the outside looking in. But when I look at you, I see home. I see the family I was always meant to have. You chose me, David, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. And that choice has made me feel worthy of love for the first time in my life. Several guests were wiping away tears. Even I felt a stab of emotion, not for the romance of the moment, but for the tragedy of it. Emma believed she'd found her fairy tale ending, but she was actually reciting vows to a man who was using her as an accessory to federal crimes. David's vows were shorter, but equally polished. Emma, you came into my life when I least expected, and showed me what I'd been missing. You have a heart that's pure and generous, and you've taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be perfect for them. The manipulation was subtle but unmistakable to me. He was positioning himself as the grateful recipient of Emma's love, rather than the criminal who'd orchestrated her participation in his schemes. I promised to protect you, to provide for you, and to love you for all the days of my life. Protect her. Provide for her. With money stolen from his victims, the ring exchange went smoothly, with both of them speaking their commitments clearly and confidently. Emma's engagement ring caught the light as she slipped David's wedding band onto his finger. By the power vested in me by the state of Washington, the officiant said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. David, you may kiss your bride. They kissed as the sun set behind them, framed perfectly by the vineyard and mountains. The photographer captured the moment. The string quartet began the recessional, and the guests erupted in applause. For exactly 30 seconds, Emma and David were married and free. Then the chapel doors burst open. FBI, nobody move. Agents in tactical gear flooded the ceremony space, weapons drawn but pointed down. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Guests screamed and scattered. Emma's bouquet fell to the ground as federal agents surrounded the altar. Emma Morrison and David Chen, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Emma's face went white with shock and confusion. David's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. He was looking for escape routes that didn't exist. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Chen announced. As she approached the altar with handcuffs, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. There's been a mistake, Emma said, her voice barely audible. We just got married. We're going on our honeymoon. Ma'am, please put your hands behind your back. Rachel. Emma's eyes found mine in the crowd. Rachel, help me. Tell them there's been a mistake. But I stayed silent, watching from my seat as federal agents placed handcuffs on my sister and ex-fiancé while their wedding guests looked on in shock and horror. The fairy tale was over. Reality had finally arrived. The chaos that followed the arrest was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Wedding guests scattered in every direction, some pulling out phones to record the scene, others simply running toward the parking lot. The string quartet abandoned their instruments, and catering staff, both real and FBI, stood frozen with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Emma was sobbing now, her wedding dress pooling around her as she sat in the chair an agent had provided. The handcuffs looked grotesque against the delicate lace of her sleeves. I don't understand, she kept saying. I don't understand what's happening. David, by contrast, had gone completely silent. He stood with his hands cuffed behind his back, his face a mask of resignation. Whatever shock he'd initially felt had been replaced by the cold calculation of someone who'd been expecting this moment. Agent Chen approached me as EMTs checked on several elderly guests who'd been overcome by the drama. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure that was true. Watching Emma's world collapse in real time was more devastating than I'd anticipated. What happens now? They'll be processed and arraigned tomorrow. The investigation will continue, but with the evidence we've gathered, we expect both of them to accept plea deals. My parents had pushed through the crowd and were now standing near Emma, my mother crying and my father demanding explanations from anyone who would listen. There's been a terrible mistake, Dad was saying to Agent Martinez. My daughter isn't a criminal. She works at a boutique. She's never even gotten a speeding ticket. Sir, I understand this is difficult, but we have extensive evidence of your daughter's involvement in multiple federal crimes. What crimes? What are you talking about? Agent Chen showed him the arrest warrant. wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence includes bank records, recorded conversations, and documentation of fraudulent business activities. Mom looked at me across the chaos. Rachel, what is this? What's happening to Emma? The moment I'd been dreading had arrived. My parents expected me to be as shocked as they were, to demand answers and protest Emma's innocence. Instead, I walked over to where Emma sat crying in her wedding dress. I trusted you, she said when she saw me approaching. I loved you. How could you let this happen to me? Let this happen. Emma, you stole $25,000 from me. You ruined my credit, destroyed my financial security, and then tried to disappear to Thailand with money you laundered through fake companies. Her face went white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the shell companies you and David created. The wire transfers from my accounts. The fraudulent loan you took out in my name. I don't know anything about. Stop lying. The words came out louder than I'd intended, causing nearby agents and guests to turn toward us. I have recordings, Emma. I have evidence. I know about the fake businesses, the offshore accounts, everything. Emma stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Recordings? Every conversation we've had for the past month. Every lie you told me about David's work, about your finances, about your future plans. You were working with them? She gestured toward the FBI agents. You were spying on me. I was protecting myself and other victims from the criminal enterprise you and David were running. Other victims. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. 6 other women, Emma. David has been doing this for years, and you helped him target me because I was your sister and he knew he could manipulate you into betraying your own family. The information seemed to hit her like physical blows. She looked around frantically, as if searching for someone to contradict what I was telling her. David? She called out. David, tell them this is wrong. Tell them we didn't do anything illegal. But David wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the ground, his jaw clenched, saying nothing. He's not going to save you, Emma, I said quietly. He never loved you. He used you to get to me, and when that was finished, he was planning to disappear to Thailand and leave you behind. That's not true. We're going to Italy. We're going on our honeymoon. Agent Chen overheard and approached with David's phone, which they confiscated during his arrest. Ms. Chen, these are your husband's travel confirmations. One-way tickets to Bangkok, departing tonight. No return flights booked. Emma stared at the phone screen, her face crumbling as she read the evidence of David's deception. But he said, Italy. He said 2 weeks in Italy. He lied to you about the destination, just like he lied to you about everything else. I said, Emma looked at David, who was now being led toward a waiting FBI vehicle. David, look at me. He turned briefly, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret cross his face. But then he looked away and allowed the agents to put him in the car. He's leaving me, Emma whispered. Even now, he's leaving me. Agent Martinez approached with paperwork. Ms. Morrison, you'll be transported to the Federal Detention Center for processing. You'll have the opportunity to call an attorney. I can't afford an attorney, Emma said. A public defender will be appointed for you. As they helped Emma to her feet, her wedding dress trailing in the dirt, she looked at me one more time. I'm sorry, she said. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I wanted to feel triumph in that moment, wanted to savor her acknowledgement of what she'd done to me. Instead, I felt hollow, empty, like someone who'd won a war, but lost everything that mattered in the process. I know, I said. They led her away, and I was left standing in the wreckage of what should have been the happiest day of her life. The vineyard was littered with abandoned boot mirrors and overturned chairs. The wedding cake sat untouched on its table, a 3-tiered monument to dreams that had turned to dust. My parents approached me, both of them looking shell-shocked. How long have you known? Dad asked. About the crimes. 2 months. About Emma's resentment and David's manipulation. I should have seen it years ago. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never would have believed me. You've spent Emma's entire life making excuses for her behavior and expecting me to understand why she needed more help, more support, more forgiveness than I did. Mom was crying again. She's our daughter. So am I said. But when was the last time you worried about my happiness the way you worry about hers? I left them standing in the vineyard and walked to my car. Tomorrow, there would be court hearings and media attention and the long process of trying to recover the money they'd stolen. But tonight, I just wanted to go home and try to process what I'd witnessed. The fairy tale was over. Justice had been served, and for the first time in months, I was free to start rebuilding my life without looking over my shoulder for the next betrayal. Emma and David had finally gotten exactly what they deserved. The family photo on my parents' mantelpiece had been turned face down when I arrived for dinner 3 days after the arrest. It was a picture from Emma's college graduation, all 4 of us smiling together, looking like the perfect American. Family, now it lay flat against the wood, too painful for my mother to look at. The newspapers are calling it the wedding day bust, Dad said, folding the Seattle Times so I couldn't see the headline. They have photos of Emma in handcuffs, still wearing her wedding dress. I'm sorry you had to see that. Are you? Mom's voice was sharp. Are you really sorry, Rachel? Because you seem awfully calm for someone whose sister is in federal prison. I'd expected this confrontation. In the 3 days since the arrests, my parents had been processing their shock and grief, and now they needed someone to blame. I was the obvious target. I'm sorry that Emma made choices that led her to federal prison, I said carefully. I'm not sorry that she's facing the consequences of those choices. She's your sister? She was my sister. She stopped being my sister when she decided to steal my identity, drain my bank accounts, and marry my ex-fiancé. Dad set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. Rachel, I understand you're angry about what happened between you and David, but this having Emma arrested at her own wedding, this is cruel even for you. Cruel for me? I stared at him. Dad, Emma stole $25,000 from me. She and David created fake companies to launder money. They targeted other women and destroyed their lives. This isn't about a romantic rivalry, this is about federal crimes. The FBI wouldn't have known about Emma if you hadn't told them, Mom said. You could have handled this as a family matter. A family matter? Mom, they were planning to flee to Thailand with stolen money. If I hadn't worked with the FBI, they would have disappeared forever and continued victimizing other people. Other people aren't our concern. Emma is our daughter. The conversation was following exactly the pattern I predicted. My parents were unable to see Emma as a criminal, only as their troubled daughter who'd made some mistakes. And they were unable to see me as a victim, only as the vindictive sister who destroyed Emma's happiness. Let me ask you something, I said. When Emma was arrested, what was your first thought? That there had been a terrible mistake, Dad said immediately. And when you learned that the evidence was overwhelming, that Emma really had committed these crimes, what was your second thought? They exchanged glances, and I could see the truth in their faces. You thought about how to protect her, I said. How to minimize the damage, how to get her the best attorney, how to help her through this crisis. When did you think about me? When did you ask how I was doing after being robbed and betrayed by my own sister? We assumed you were fine, Mom said defensively. You're always fine. You're strong, you're successful, you handle things. I handle things because I've never had any other choice. You've spent Emma's entire life expecting me to be the understanding one, the mature one, the one who sacrifices for family harmony. That's not true, isn't it? When Emma dropped out of college, you asked me to loan her money. When she couldn't find a job, you asked me to help her with connections. When she was struggling with relationships, you suggested I include her in my social activities. But when she stole from me and married my ex-fiancé, you asked me to be happy for her. The silence that followed was damning. Even now, I continued. 3 days after learning that your daughter is a federal criminal who systematically destroyed my life, you're angry with me for seeking justice instead of angry with her for committing the crimes. Dad cleared his throat. Emma is in jail, Rachel. She's lost everything. Isn't that punishment enough? For wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft? No, Dad, jail time is exactly the appropriate punishment. She's been manipulated by that man. David used her psychological vulnerabilities. Emma is 30 years old. She made adult decisions to commit adult crimes. The fact that David manipulated her doesn't make her less guilty. Mom started crying again. She's our baby. She's always needed more help, more support, and that's exactly why she became criminal, I said. Because you've spent her entire life teaching her that she's not responsible for her actions, that there will always be someone else to blame, someone else to fix her problems. I pulled out my phone and showed them the bank statements I'd received from the FBI, documenting the systematic theft from my accounts. Look at this. Look at how methodical this was. These weren't impulsive mistakes or crimes of passion. This was a calculated, ongoing conspiracy to destroy my financial life. Dad glanced at the statements and looked away. We get it, Rachel. You're angry. I'm not angry anymore. I'm done. What do you mean done? I mean, I'm done being the family scapegoat. I'm done being expected to understand and forgive and sacrifice. While Emma gets endless chances to hurt people without consequences, I stood up to leave, but Mom grabbed my arm. You can't abandon your family. We're all we have. Emma abandoned this family when she decided to commit federal crimes. You abandoned me when you chose to blame me for her arrest instead of supporting me through her betrayal. We love you both. No, you don't. You love the idea of Emma, the troubled daughter who needs your protection. And you love the idea of me, the successful daughter who doesn't need anything from you. But you don't actually see either of us as real people with real needs and real flaws. I picked up the overturned family photo and looked at it one more time. For people who'd never really understood each other, held together by obligation and guilt rather than genuine love. Emma is going to prison, I said. She probably served 2 to 3 years if she cooperates with the investigation. When she gets out, she needs support rebuilding her life. That support can come from you, but it won't come from me. Rachel, I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said. But I'm not going to pretend that what Emma did to me was acceptable, and I'm not going to enable your continued denial about who she really is. I left them sitting at their kitchen table with the family photo between them, finally forced to confront the truth about their daughters without me there to serve as the reasonable one who made everything okay. For the first time in my adult life, I was free from the burden of managing their emotions and protecting Emma from the consequences of her choices. It felt like stepping out of a prison I hadn't even realized I was in. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle was bustling with activity on the morning of Emma and David's sentencing. I sat in the gallery with 5 other victims of their scheme, women I met through the FBI investigation who'd had their lives similarly destroyed by David's operation. Sarah Kim, the Microsoft engineer, sat to my right. Jennifer Walsh, Emma's birth mother and David's first known victim, had flown up from Portland for the hearing. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that the teenage mother who'd given up her baby to provide a better life was now watching that. Same child faced federal sentencing for crimes that had destroyed other women's lives. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison. The bailiff announced. No relation to me, but the shared name felt like a good omen. Emma entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back severely, looking nothing like the radiant bride who'd walked down the aisle 3 months ago. She'd lost weight during her time in detention, and her face had the hollow look of someone who'd finally grasped the magnitude of her situation. David followed. Also in orange, his transformation even more dramatic. The confident tech executive had been replaced by a man who looked older, smaller, defeated by the weight of his crimes. Agent Chen had briefed me on the plea negotiations. David had ultimately refused to cooperate, maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. Emma, by contrast, had accepted a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation and testimony against David's broader criminal network. We'll begin with the sentencing of David Chen. Judge Morrison announced that the prosecutor read a detailed account of David's crimes, 6 victims over 2 years. more than $200,000 in stolen funds, sophisticated money laundering operations, and evidence of plans to expand the scheme internationally. The picture that emerged was of a predator who had systematically targeted professional women, using romantic relationships as cover for financial devastation. Mr. Chen showed no remorse throughout this investigation. The prosecutor continued. He refused to cooperate with authorities, declined to provide information about accomplices or victims, and maintained his innocence even when confronted with overwhelming evidence. His crimes were calculated, methodical, and devastating too. His victims. David's public defender made a brief argument for leniency based on his lack of prior criminal history, but it felt perfunctory. Even his own attorney seemed to understand that David's actions were indefensible. David Chen, Judge Morrison said, "You have been convicted of wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Your actions have caused immeasurable harm to multiple victims, and your refusal to take responsibility shows a fundamental lack of remorse. I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay full restitution to your victims in the amount of $247,000, plus interest and penalties. 8 years. David would be in his 40s when he was released, his tech career destroyed, his future permanently altered by his crimes. Emma's sentencing was more complex. Her attorney had provided extensive documentation of her psychological history, her adoption trauma, and evidence that she'd been manipulated by David. Character witnesses testified to her previous good behavior and her genuine remorse. Ms. Morrison, the prosecutor acknowledged, cooperated fully with our investigation. Her testimony was instrumental in identifying other victims and uncovering the full scope of the criminal enterprise. However, her actions caused significant harm to her own sister and other victims. Emma was given the opportunity to address the court before sentencing. She stood slowly, her voice barely audible as she began to speak. Your Honor, I know that nothing I say can undo the harm I've caused. I betrayed my sister's trust, stole her money, and participated in crimes that hurt innocent people. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. I've spent the past 3 months trying to understand how I became someone capable of these actions. I was angry, jealous, and resentful about things that weren't Rachel's fault. David convinced me that taking from her was somehow justified, that she owed me something because of her success. She turned toward the gallery, her eyes finding mine. Rachel, I destroyed our relationship for money and a man who never loved either of us. I know you can't forgive me, and I don't expect you to. But I want you to know that I understand now what I took from you, and I'm ashamed of who I became. Judge Morrison listened impassively, then delivered Emma's sentence. Ms. Morrison, while I acknowledge your cooperation and apparent remorse, your crimes were serious, and your victim was your own sister. I sentence you to 30 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution of $25,000 to Rachel Morrison, plus interest and penalties. 2.5 years. Emma would serve her time and be released while still in her early 30s, with a chance to rebuild her life. It felt like justice, not the harsh retribution I might have wanted in my angriest moments, but appropriate consequences for her choices. After the hearing, I met with Agent Chen to discuss the restitution process. David's assets have been seized, but recovering the offshore funds will take time, she explained. Emma's cooperation helped us identify several accounts, which should expedite the process. What about the other victims? Similar situation? Full restitution is ordered for everyone, but the timeline depends on how quickly we can recover the laundered money. Jennifer Walsh approached me as I was leaving the courthouse. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly, for giving birth to someone who hurt you. Emma's crimes aren't your fault. You were a victim too. I keep thinking about the choice I made 30 years ago, giving her up for adoption. I thought I was giving her a better life. You were 18 years old and making the best decision you could. What Emma did with the life you gave her was her choice. We talked for a few more minutes about Emma's childhood, her adoption, and the psychological factors that had made her vulnerable to David's manipulation. It was surreal discussing my sister with the woman who'd given birth to her two victims of Emma's crimes, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. "Will you visit her in prison?" Jennifer asked. "I don't know. Maybe someday when I've had more time to heal." "She's still your sister." "She's a federal criminal who systematically destroyed my life. The fact that we share parents doesn't erase that." Jennifer nodded sadly. "I hope someday you can find peace with all of this." "I already have," I said, and realized it was true. The anger that had consumed me for months was gone, replaced by something that felt like closure. Emma and David had been held accountable for their crimes. Justice had been served. I could finally move forward without looking over my shoulder. I walked out of the courthouse into the Seattle sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. The ordeal was over. The healing could begin. 1 year later, I stood in the downtown Seattle office space that would soon house Morrison Strategic Consulting, my independent marketing firm. The business license hung in a frame on my desk, official paperwork that represented everything I'd rebuilt from the ashes of my old life. The restitution money had finally come through 6 months after the sentencing, along with additional funds recovered from David's offshore accounts. It wasn't everything they'd stolen, but it was enough to pay off the fraudulent debts and start over. More importantly, it was validation that justice had been served. "The contractors say they'll be finished with the renovation next week," Maya sighed, walking into what would become our conference room. She'd follow me from my old job, becoming the first employee of my new venture. "Then we can start moving in furniture." Morrison Strategic Consulting had grown faster than I'd anticipated. Word of my experience had spread through Seattle's business community, and I discovered there was significant demand for someone who understood both marketing strategy and fraud prevention. Companies wanted help protecting themselves from the kind of sophisticated financial crimes David had perfected. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "Saw the news about your new business. Congratulations. Coffee soon?" Sarah Chen had become an unexpected friend during the investigation and trial. Our professional relationship had evolved into genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared understanding of how justice really works. I'd also reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my relationship with David, people I neglected while focusing on wedding planning and building a life that had turned out to be built on lies. It was humbling to realize how much I'd isolated myself in pursuit of a fairy tale that never existed. "Any word from your parents?" Maya asked, organizing client files on the reception desk. "We have dinner once a month. It's cordial but distant." My relationship with my parents had never fully recovered from Emma's arrest. They'd eventually acknowledged that she'd committed serious crimes, but they still believed I'd been unnecessarily harsh in my response. The monthly dinners were their attempt to maintain a relationship without addressing the fundamental issues. God had driven us apart. And Emma? She's at a federal facility in Oregon. She'd be eligible for early release in 6 months if she maintains good behavior. I never visited Emma in prison, though she'd written me several letters that remained unopened in a box in my closet. I wasn't ready for that conversation, and I might never be. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness, even between sisters. The front door chimed as my first client of the day arrived, a local tech startup that wanted help developing marketing strategies that wouldn't attract the attention of financial criminals. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd become an expert in the very field that had once destroyed my life. "Ms. Morrison?" "I'm Kevin Walsh from Emerald City Gaming." I led into my temporary office space, noting that he seemed nervous about something beyond the usual first meeting jitters. "What can I do for you, Mr. Walsh?" "We've been hearing some concerning things about our payment processing partner." "Nothing concrete, but some irregularities that remind me of cases I've read about in the news." He handed me a folder containing financial documents that made my blood run cold. The patterns were familiar shell companies, complex wire transfers, international movements of money that didn't match the reported business activities. "Mr. Walsh, I think you might be dealing with something more serious than marketing concerns. Have you considered contacting law enforcement? We weren't sure if we had enough evidence." "That's why we came to you. We heard you had experience with financial crimes." I spent the next hour reviewing his documents and making notes. The sophistication of the operation reminded me of David's work, but the scale was much larger. This wasn't just individual identity theft. This looked like a network that was targeting entire companies. "I'm going to recommend that you contact the FBI immediately," I said. "And I think you should consider engaging a forensic accountant before you proceed with any more transactions through this payment processor." After Kevin left, I sat in my office thinking about the strange circles life draws. A year ago, I'd been a victim of the kind of crimes Kevin's company was now facing. Today, I was in a position to help prevent other people from experiencing what I'd been through. My phone rang. Agent Chen returning my call. "Sarah, I just had a client meeting that I think you should know about. It looks like there might be another financial fraud operation targeting Seattle tech companies. Can you forward me the information? We've been tracking some suspicious activity that might be connected." "Of course, and Sarah, thank you." "For what?" "For helping me understand that getting justice doesn't mean getting revenge. That holding people accountable isn't the same as destroying them. You figured that out on your own, Rachel. I just provided the tools." After we hung up, I looked around my new office space. Clean, modern, entirely mine. No shared dreams with a fiancé who'd been lying to me. No family obligations to people who expected me to sacrifice my well-being for their comfort. Just me, my skills, my determination, and my hard-earned wisdom about how the world really works. The business license on my desk represented more than just a new company. It represented my independence, my strength, and my refusal to be defined by what other people had done to me. Emma was in prison, paying for her crimes. David was serving his sentence, his life permanently altered by his choices. My parents were wrestling with their own denial and guilt, and I was here building something new from the foundation of everything I'd learned about betrayal, justice, and resilience. I'd started this journey as a victim, someone whose perfect life had been shattered by people she trusted. I was ending it as a survivor who not only rebuilt her life, but had found purpose in protecting others from similar devastation. The phone rang again, interrupting my thoughts. It was a potential client who'd heard about my work from Kevin Walsh. "Miss Morrison?" "My name is Lisa Chen, no relation to your ex-fiancé," she said with a slight laugh. "I run a consulting firm that's been experiencing some unusual financial irregularities. I was hoping we could meet to discuss your services. Of course, when would be convenient for you?" As I scheduled another consultation, I realized that this was what healing looked like. Not the dramatic confrontation or emotional catharsis that movies promised, but the quiet satisfaction of useful work, meaningful relationships, and a life built on truth rather than lies. I walked to the window and looked out at the Seattle skyline, the same view I'd had from my old corporate office, but seen now through completely different eyes. The woman who'd stared out that window a year ago, devastated by David's betrayal and unable to imagine a future without him, felt like a stranger to me now. That woman had believed that love meant surrendering your independence, that family meant accepting abuse in the name of loyalty, that success meant achieving other people's dreams for your life. This woman, the one I'd become through fire and federal investigations and the slow, painful process of learning to trust her own judgment, knew better. I had built something that was entirely mine. Not a life designed to please a man who was using me, not a career shaped by family expectations, not a future dependent on other people's choices. My business, my rules, my second chance. The intercom buzzed with Maya's voice. "Rachel, your 2:00 is here early. Should I send her up?" "Give me 5 minutes, then send her up." I straightened my jacket, checked my appearance in the mirror, and prepared to meet another client who needed help protecting what they built. It was satisfying work, meaningful work, work that used everything I'd learned about human nature's capacity for both cruelty and resilience. Emma had thought she was taking my life when she stole my fiancé and my money. She'd actually given me something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to survive anything, smart enough to fight back against people who underestimated me, and brave enough to build something better from the ruins of what I'd lost. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't destruction. It was living well, helping others, and refusing to let other people's choices define your future. I was Rachel Morrison, 32 years old, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be.